So in an effort, we got a little bit off schedule with Raj, and I could listen to Raj all day long, so I'm certainly not going to stop Raj. What we want to do is talk a little bit about public service, and joining me today are three wonderful examples of public service in this administration. You all have their bios, so I don't want to go back over them again. But what I would like is for each of the panelists just to give maybe 2 or 3 minutes, introduce yourself and what you do in your agency.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Great to see all your faces here today. My name is Jaeyeon Jung. I'm currently a senior counsel with the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Yay, Director Cordray. But previously, the previous 14 years, I served at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division as a senior trial attorney there. But I made the move about a month ago, so this is a great time to be at Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and I'm in the Office of Fair Lending and Equal Opportunity. And basically what our office does is ensure that there's fair, equitable, and discriminatory access to credit, access to the markets, access for consumers throughout the country and in almost every aspect of consumer issues. And as you all know, that's a huge impact to the American family, to the American economy, from basic loans, payday loans, to all the way to mortgages on your homes and auto loans and that type of thing. So it's really exciting to be there and to be in a brand new federal agency and to be on the ground, so to speak, creating a 21st century agency. And everyone there actually really believes that they can do it differently and better and improve upon the things that we've learned from, and to ensure that we meet the mission. So that's what I do now, and I'll just pass it on to Parag.
Thanks, Jaeyeon. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on a panel with people that I love and respect so much. I'm Parag Mehta, and I am at the U.S. Department of Labor. Jaeyeon mentioned that her agency is brand new. Mine is approaching our centennial. We're about to be 100 years old. And at the Department of Labor, we are responsible for making sure that all workplaces in this country are safe, fair, and diverse, to make sure that workers get the wages and the benefits to which they are entitled, the wages and benefits they earned, to make sure that you, the American public, have access to the data. The first Friday of every month, we put out the unemployment numbers, that gets a lot of press coverage. That comes out of our Bureau of Labor Statistics. But most importantly, the Secretary of Labor, Hilda Solis, said that her vision for the Department of Labor is to make sure that there are good jobs for everyone. And that means the opportunity for good jobs. So specifically, I work for the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. We are the civil rights agency within the Labor Department, responsible for making sure that all federal contractors and subcontractors, it's about 200,000 businesses in this country, ensure non-discrimination for their workforce and take affirmative action so that the people working for their companies look like, sound like, and truly reflect this country and its great diversity.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Meera Patel. I work on the Secretary's policy planning staff at the State Department, and our staff reports directly to the Secretary. We exist as an internal think tank for her to deal with ongoing policy analysis, and I think most importantly, to look beyond the tyranny of the inbox to the medium and long-term horizons. It's a dynamic and challenging time to be there. We've seen, I think, more global change than we've experienced in many decades, just in the last 2.5, 3 years. I cover LGBT issues, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender issues for the Secretary. I also cover women's issues, refugees, and public-private partnerships. I think a couple, I'll just talk briefly about some of the things I'm working on today, and then if you have specific questions about the work of state, we can come back to it. I recently, some of you may have seen the Secretary's speech in Geneva on LGBT human rights, which I think was incredibly important, and launched a $3 million public-private partnership I conceived of to help fund LGBT NGOs on the ground all around the world, from Mongolia to Uganda to Honduras. And I'm also working on the Women in Public Service project, which is encouraging more women to run for office, to serve in governments, to serve their communities and NGOs. It's wonderful to see a room full of young women and young men who are committed to engaging in their communities. I think it's something that we all would love to see more of, and I know Parag's put many years into making that happen. And the last thing I'll say is just that I think at this time of great change, it's really important to have youth engaged. It's a focus of the Secretary. Over 60% of the world's population is under 30, and we've seen where youth have engaged in incredibly positive ways to change their countries across the Arab Spring revolutions. And we've also seen that terrorist organizations and other criminal organizations recruit youth to try and, who have very little opportunities to try and promote instability. So we need your ideas, we need your energy, and I hope you'll come serve in the Foreign Service in particular.
Great, thank you. Before we get to the questions, and what we'll probably do is I'll do a couple icebreaker questions, and then I want to open it up to audience. There was that initial reluctance for people to stand up, and I want you guys to get ready to hit the microphones. But before I do that, I just want to recognize one person who isn't here that wanted to be here. Tony Baba Uta, who is our Assistant Secretary for Insular Affairs at the Department of Interior, was supposed to be here. Unfortunately, he was called away. I highlight Tony because he's, I think, the highest-ranking Pacific Islander that we have in the administration. It's an important commitment that we have to that community. I believe one of our interns, Seata, is Samoan, who is helping out with the event, and so we welcome her. We obviously welcome people of all, we welcome everybody, but I just wanted to point that out since Tony could not be here. Well, I gave you 30 seconds about one incident that that motivated me into public service, and I think Raj gave you his story. I'd love to hear from the panelists. How did you get involved in public service? What interested you? And along the lines of what Raj said in terms of struggles with his family, what were the types of obstacles that you encountered along the way? And again, let me just ask you to keep it to maybe 2 or 3 minutes or so.
Okay. Wow, this is live stream. Good thing my parents aren't watching. Well, I guess I'll start with the first one. I think, growing up here, I'm an immigrant, first woman to go to college and to graduate, first man or woman to go to law school in my family. We didn't know any lawyers. We didn't have any connections. I had never even met one. But there was something that said, that's what I want to do, and I want to be a lawyer, and I want to do civil rights work. And so from very, very early age, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And there was disbelief, and there was doubt. But I think that's what spurred me to be motivated to do it and to get there. And as I got into college and got into social justice issues and the social justice movement, primarily with other people and communities of color, it was not really where I grew up in Colorado. There wasn't a huge civil rights, social justice movement groundswell with the Asian American community at that time. And so my motivation and my experience was with other communities of color. And so that's when I knew that I wanted to go to law school. I didn't want to be a corporate lawyer. I didn't want to go to a law firm, much to the chagrin of my parents. But I knew that I wanted to enter public service and to work as a lawyer and to use that for the promotion of civil rights within our community as well as others. And I think the importance of, I think someone had mentioned some of the recent sad events and how we get beyond that. And I think one of the main things we have to always remember is that we can't always just wait for an experience that makes sense to us. We can't wait for it to have a personal connection. We have to realize the principle of why it applies to us. And so we have to recognize that the unity that we have with other communities and civil rights groups is what needs to motivate us. We can't wait for it to happen to our family. So having that role and getting out there and deciding that this is what you want to do and being a part of this is an amazing town. And it's an amazing place to be because you are at the center of so much power and policy and change. And to come here to DC, to leave kind of the confines of your communities and your homes, and to venture out and to be a part of that change is something that you all really need to think about. This is an amazing experience for you to be here in the White House as students, and so this could be the beginning of your path to public interest or to civil rights work or to social justice work. And so I hope all of you will really think deeply about what will be that fire in your belly and make you motivated to go out and really do something meaningful. So I think that was pretty much it.
So my dad actually is watching, so I'm going to be careful what I say. He's watching from Texas. Hi, Dad. I didn't have a tiger mom, but I did have a dragon dad, and a fire-breathing dragon dad. I was, like Raj, supposed to be a doctor, and I don't just say that, whimsically. It's a family business. My grandparents, my parents, all my uncles and aunts, they were very specific. They wanted me to be a pulmonologist. And I actually was pre-med in school, and during my third year of college, when I was at the University of Texas, there was a big protest on our campus over our Asian American Studies program, and several students got arrested, and I was the assistant ombudsman at the time, so I helped mediate the protest between the administration and the students. And it sort of opened me up to this idea that there are issues bigger than our own individual communities, because I had never really thought of myself as an Asian American and Pacific Islander. I had grown up as an Indian American, as a Gujarati, as a Texan. Occasionally I dabbled in being a Jewish person, I don't know. But it made me realize that there is this bigger thing, and as Jayan said, don't wait for the bad thing to happen to you. And that's when I started learning Asian American history. And I read Helen Zia's book about our history, and it sort of opened my eyes to the possibility. So that year, our student union was facing massive funding cuts and a lot of layoffs. And I had gotten really close to a lot of the staff at the union, and I thought this was wrong. So I started a process of lobbying our state legislature. And if anybody knows anything about the Texas legislature, Ramey can tell you it's the most dysfunctional legislature in the country. Literally, we have gunfights, fistfights in the floor of our legislature. So I spent about a year working with our student community to get a bill passed through the legislature that would change the funding for our student union so that it would be stable. And I remember the day the bill got signed, I got called to watch from the gallery on that, in the House and see that moment happen and know that I had been a part of that. I'd helped affect that change. And that was the moment that medical school ended for me. Because it was kind of like a Natasha Bedingfield song, the rest was still unwritten. So I went home and set my mom and dad down and said two things. One, I'm gay. Two, I'm not going to be a doctor.
Which did you
I
do
thought
first?
I did the gay thing first because
Okay.
the doctor was actually going to be more painful. Because their opinion was you can always marry a doctor or civil union a doctor. So anyway, so from there I actually went to I had to change my whole plan because I had been going through this pre-med curriculum and I had to come up with a new plan. And my dad, to his credit, said, "We'll support you whatever you want to do, but you've got to be the best at it." And to the question earlier about how did I convince my parents, I said I wanted to go into politics, which is not the right thing to say to an Asian American parent. Because for a lot of them, they come from countries where politics is considered a very dirty, corrupt, not honorable profession. So the argument I ended up making to them was, look, the economy goes up and down, but there's always an election. I will have job stability for the rest of my life. They liked that, and they bought that. So I ended up going to grad school at Syracuse University. I got a degree from the Maxwell School in Public Administration. And then a really amazing thing happened. I got something called the Presidential Management Fellowship, which is a wonderful program for people who want to work in the federal government. It's for grad students, lawyers, MPAs, policy, social work, whatever. And I did a 2-year fellowship in the federal government, and my first job was working for the White House Initiative on AAPIs when President Clinton started it in 1999. And again, I had to go home and explain to my parents what a Pacific Islander was and why it mattered to us. But really after 9/11, I was here working in the Bush administration, since we're all sharing secrets about our Republican ties. I worked for President Bush as a speechwriter for about a year and a half. And I was here on 9/11, and one of the amazing things to me about that experience was 4 days after 9/11, several of us in this room stood at the Japanese American War Memorial and held a press conference about the backlash against South Asian and Arab and Muslim Americans. And there was a great speaker from the Japanese American community who said 60 years ago, we made a mistake and we didn't stand together when Japanese Americans were being interned. We're not going to let it happen again. And that's the moment when I showed to my parents that this coalition, this community that we have built, this ability to advocate for ourselves in larger numbers is so important. And that's started the work that I've been doing ever since.
Well, following the theme of breaking our parents' hearts, I'm the daughter of a father who was born and raised in Nairobi and whose parents were Indian. I think that global affairs were just built into my bones, I imagine, for a lot of you. It's that way to see your parents or your grandparents or others in your family. To know of their struggles. My grandmother never went beyond 8th grade. She was in an arranged marriage by the time she was 16. And I think that's really propelled me to public service. It is the most satisfying feeling to know that you're helping people who have so few opportunities, that you're making the world better at whatever degree you're doing it, whether it's in your community, with your neighbors, whether it's In my case, going to Congo and meeting with women who had experienced sexual and gender-based violence and trying to think through very difficult challenges, knowing that you're going to touch somebody who would have never had an opportunity otherwise. I think that's just, it's incredibly important, and I do think it's important to look at these big challenges. Sometimes those can seem overwhelming, but you can make a real difference, and you never know what seed, what germ, where that will lead, as Parag said.
That's great, thank you. Let me just ask one more icebreaker question, and then if folks want to queue up and ask questions, we'll do it that way. Let me just ask the panelists, since most of the people in the audience, I think, are college students, looking back now, is there one piece of advice you would have for them, something that you wish you had known then that you now know?
I can start. Sure, I'll start.
Since you're closer to college than the rest of us.
Yes, as someone who was.
I literally have I still don't know who Natasha Bedingfield is, actually, so.
She's probably joining your Twitter.
She does Twitter, exactly.
Yeah.
Chris Lou 44.
Yeah, I was young enough that 9/11 was actually the second week of college for me, and I think that also helped shape sort of a new awareness of politics, of global affairs. I talked about my parents briefly, but I will say that they believed that, as I think many parents, Asian American parents do in particular, that law, medicine, stable careers, finance make sense. They make sense for securing your future. And so they just couldn't understand it when I left a job as a foreign affairs trader at Lehman Brothers, which is ironic in retrospect now that Lehman no longer exists, to take a low-paid internship with very little fanfare. I would encourage you strongly to follow your internal passion and your voice, even if that means leaving something stable, even if you're not quite sure what the end result will be. The two best jobs I've ever had, one working at the Center for American Progress, which is a progressive think tank in town. It's where Melody Barnes, the recent head of the DPC, was, and two, working for Senator Clinton in the Senate office, although now I'd say it's probably the best job I have, but it was a close second. I got that job as a 25-year-old intern, leaving a very steady job as a defense policy analyst. I think don't get stuck wondering, what if? Listen to your internal voice. I went into finance for a couple of years. I was in New York, and I just felt unsatisfied. And I had done a program my senior year, back in the old days in 2005, when you did banking, you knew you had a job in September of your senior year, which was fantastic. It opened up the entire year, so I took poetry, I took music, and I also took this political affairs 2-week trip to DC, and we met with Supreme Court justices and others. And one of them was a trip to CAP, where Melody Barnes, who was still working there at the time, spoke to us, and I was just struck by the dynamism of the thinking there, people fighting for reproductive rights, people fighting for the people of Darfur who had no voice. And I was like, well, in my next life, I'll work here, but I can't now. I'm all set, I have a great job, I'm just gonna do that, and everything will work out. And 2 years later, I thought back to that meeting with her, and that's what brought me back to DC, and I took an internship there. But I never would have guessed I would have led to this point right now without having taken that leap of faith. And I think you're always going to feel unsatisfied if you don't listen to your internal voice.
I think the one advice I'd give you for those of you who are either in college or high school students entering college soon is that college is really the last time in my life when I really controlled my time, meaning my summers, my breaks, even during the week outside of class, I could determine what to do with that time, whether it was spending it doing extracurricular activities, student leadership work, taking extra courses, study abroad, whatever. And if I could go back and do it again, having seen what I've seen in DC for the last decade, I would have done an internship, because I think internships, whether you come here for it or you do it in your community, it doesn't have to be a government internship, it could be with the private sector or nonprofit, but it's kind of a chance to see what the options are, and it'll help you define your career path a lot better. And the second point that I would make is take risks, because I think too many times when we're in college, we're thinking about the resume and what are we going to have the right factors on our resume that will help us get the job we want to get down the road. The truth of the matter is, as I think you've heard from a lot of the speakers here, most of us didn't know in college that we would be doing the jobs we're doing today. So you can't always plan for that. So take risks, do things that are interesting, do things that challenge you, do things that put you outside of your comfort zone. And Raj talked about driving people around in Nashville. I think if you have a chance to volunteer and work on a campaign, no matter what you want to do in your life path, in your career, I think it's going to be an amazing experience for you because you're going to learn so much about yourself, and it's a chance to engage civically. Civic participation is the one thing that unifies every one of us, not religion, not class, not profession, but the chance to participate in the civic life of our country. And this is 2012, and it's election year. I say take advantage of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have much more to add. I think the one theme would be just to follow your passion. And if that means you have to sit down and actually really take stock of what your passion is, then do it. And I know that a lot of us, we make jokes about our parents and kind of the model minority and how a lot of parents feel. But at the end of the day, you really need to do justice to what your parents did to bring you to this point. And so you have to really go by what will make you happy. Because at the end of the day, that will permeate the rest of your family. And so, worrying about the Ivy League or worrying about the 4.0 and all of that, that's all fine and well. But, that's a dime a dozen, especially in this town. And so the people, though, that I'm going to, bank on, the people that I want to sit next to are the ones that are gonna be in the trenches with me and be in that foxhole, and we'll fight. We'll fight for our communities. We'll fight for the individuals who don't have those voices, which are many times are our parents. You guys are sitting here, in this very plush, at the White House. My parents were never given this opportunity, and they never would have thought of me having this opportunity. So thinking, our parents are working very hard. They're not focused on all these internships and all these great kind of positions and titles. So really, really think about what will give you meaning in life and what will make it your passion. Follow that passion. It's not just a phrase. You really need to figure that out because that's gonna really make you succeed in whatever you do.
Thank you all. That's great advice from everybody. Let me just open it up and see what questions we have from the audience.
Oh my.
All right, so let me just say this. We've got about, I want to keep us sort of on schedule, so let's go for about a half hour or so. So we'll try to take, 3, 4 questions depending on, and I'll ask the panelists. We all, if it's kind of repetitive, we don't all have to answer every question. So why don't we start over here?
Hi, I'm Joya Ahmed. I'm a freshman at Columbia University in the engineering school. And my question for all three of you is about knowledge and awareness, because all three of you work in incredibly important departments, but they're departments that not a lot of people who should know about you actually know about. And the people in this room, while it's great that we're hearing your information, we're probably the sector of the community that is most likely to search out this information on our own. So how would you recommend working on campus or in communities or even from the government in getting information out to people in the community who don't have access or don't have the wherewithal to try and incorporate this information into their daily lives?
As someone who's in a brand new agency, I know one of our fundamental missions at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau is to make sure that we talk to the consumers, because those are our constituents. Those are the individuals that our core mission is to ensure that the average Americans have that access to credit and to markets. The instability that is results we've seen when the middle Americans and lower income Americans are ignored. And so it's fundamental that I think the onus is on the agencies as well as all of us who serve those agencies to make sure that we are connecting with the individuals and that we're not an inside the beltway kind of talking, just through TV and politicians. We really do need to get out there and do that, and through internships and having that connection with Main Street.
Joya, I think that's a really important question, and it's actually the fundamental reason why I came back to government after leaving, was when I worked here during the Clinton and the Bush administrations, I saw so many amazing things that federal agencies were doing that no one had ever heard of. I was at the Department of Health and Human Services, where there are all these little agencies, maternal and child health, rural health, the Ryan White AIDS Act, all these initiatives that were being done, and then you go to election years where people would talk about big government and cutting programs and not having any idea what they were talking about. So I think Jayan's right that the onus is on us as government to make sure that we get the word out, but the onus is also on you because you have the privilege of being in this space, because you have access to this information, to make sure that you take it back to the communities and you let them know what we're doing. And these guidebooks that the initiative is prepared for you, they have a really great, another book on the federal government, like a snapshot of all the federal agencies and what they do. I encourage you to download it from the website and share it with people. But we really rely, especially in our community, we rely on word of mouth. So when someone's experiencing a problem of discrimination in the workplace, you now know where to send them to me. If they're experiencing a problem with credit, access to credit, you know what Jayan does. If they're experiencing problems getting their visas, talk to Mira. Mira does way more than getting visas for people. But my point is that it's important for us to educate ourselves, and I think one of the really amazing things about the initiative is that for the last couple of years, they've put a really important priority on access. Linguistic access, cultural access. So that means that what we do has to be translated into the languages that our community speaks. 60% of our communities have limited English proficiency. So making sure that the immigrant populations in our community can understand what we're putting out there. But there's also cultural competency, which means is the information being shared and given in a way that's going to be comfortable for our communities? When Jan was working at the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division, a lot of the times when they were going out trying to interview people, interview victims of discrimination, talk to people who are experiencing discrimination in housing, they had to think about, does somebody with a government badge knocking on your door, is that really the best way to approach the Asian American community, the Latino communities, the African American communities? So thinking through that, and that's one of the wonderful things that the initiative has done for all of us, is to help us think through how our agencies communicate and provide access to our services.
I'll say more broadly, in a year that I think is going to be very focused on jobs and the economy, and not many Americans are going to be thinking about or worrying about the condition of people around the world because they have significant challenges at home. It's the Secretary and Administrator Shah have done a fantastic job of really explaining how the work that we do impacts ordinary Americans, not just in terms of national security, but also in terms of jobs, and for us, that's trade agreements, it's job training programs, it's increasing opportunities for women entrepreneurs. With the Women in Public Service Initiative, we're actually bringing women from all around the world here to women's colleges in the U.S. to be trained in leadership skills because that kind of capacity just doesn't exist internationally. And I think those sort of people-to-people exchanges are critical. We also have international visitors programs that bring leaders from around the world to the U.S. to meet with mayors, politicians, NGO leaders from places to Nashville to San Francisco on a variety of different issues. And those kinds of things, I think, are incredibly important in promoting American values and really demonstrating the width and breadth of talent in our country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me go over here.
Hi, my name is Lavinia Tamoy Bao. I am the Director of Diversity in Student Government at the University of Utah. And I am very excited to be here. My question is, I am going into a local internship when I get back from this event. And I would like to know, as a Pacific Islander representative and also an advocate for the AAPI community, what type of, while I'm interning in the legislative session in Utah, because we don't have a strong representation, like what kind of initiatives or things that issues that should I look for while I'm in there, and also what kind of resources are available coming from an underrepresented state of AAPI, the AAPI community. But what can I do, or what can I, like, is there some kind of a connection for the state and federal for AAPI community, especially being from Salt Lake or from Utah?
I'll tackle this just quickly. Thank you for your leadership already. I think it's really important to see women of color in prominent positions, particularly in places where not many, as you say, exist at this point. But
It's been a challenge.
I'll give you a few years, and I'm sure you'll be there as well. One thing I would say for me that's worked well is, being oftentimes in a room the only person under 30, the only woman, the only person of color, the only gay person. There are some areas in which you can already lend expertise where there are large gaps. In my building, there are people who can tell you about sort of Nigerian regional conflicts and how one family is going to impact some local election. But there aren't many people who can speak with a degree of proficiency about LGBT issues or youth issues. I think we've improved that dramatically over the last 3.5 years, but I'd say look to your own passions and personal experience. I think they can actually take you quite far, and if you find the right boss, they should and will be willing to make sure you're able to evidence those to the furthest degree.
I think one thing to remember is that it's an internship, right? So you want to spend a significant amount of time listening and learning, but remember that you have an important role there. You're going to oftentimes be the only person who looks like you in the room, in the table. So ask yourself, either out loud or to just your supervisor or to the people you're working with, is there an AAPI angle to this? You know, Utah has, according to the new census data, one of the largest, fastest growing populations of Pacific Islanders in the country. You have an important role to play in that legislature this summer as an educator, because a lot of the people you're going to be working with don't know much about your communities. They don't understand your communities. They don't know what the challenges and the issues your communities face. So every time there's a discussion about the budget deficit, about education, about construction for state highways, whatever the issue might be, ask yourself, is there a way that this issue affects my communities? And is there a place for me to vocalize those issues in this room? And never be afraid to be that advocate. But do it in a way that's smart and that's sufficient, is going to gain the respect of your colleagues.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go over here.
Hi, my name is Rachel Park. I'm a student from Georgetown University studying international politics. I wanted you to talk about some limitations we face as students pursuing jobs and career in U.S. government, but are currently, although they are legal residents of the states, they aren't necessarily U.S. citizens. So those are, in many cases, restrictions in getting internships and job opportunities. And specifically to Ms. Patil, because I'm interested in getting into the State Department, I was personally very disheartened to not see the State Department in the AAPI Federal Resource Guide, although the State Department, I believe, is one of the official member of AAPI. So I want to ask if you have seen changes in demographics, whether you have seen demographic changes in the State Department currently, and to what extent, and whether there are potentially opportunities for students pursuing careers in that field. And also specifically to Ms. Chung, I'm also an immigrant and I am pursuing a law degree soon. And I wanted to ask you, despite the current efforts to allow more people into public engagement, I feel that there are still many limitations. So what are some advice that you can give us to, you know, in the step of pursuing and researching those things? I'm sure you have faced several difficulties as immigrants as well. So if you can share some stories, that'll be great.
I'll just touch on briefly. Rachel, you asked a great question, and one that I have somewhat of an answer to, but I think there's actually more questions, and therefore for us, the onus is to figure it out. One challenge are security clearances and obtaining those. I remember when I was filling out mine, it said, you know, name anyone you've spoken to in the last 7 years who's not an American citizen. And so I just had pages and pages of different people, and you had to give addresses or any family members. That's a real challenge if you're a not a white American who, you know, doesn't have extended family abroad. The other issue you point to are the State Department demographics. I think we've gotten much better in the last few years. It's been a real focus of the secretaries to get the full width and breadth of the talent of America into the Foreign Service, to make sure that the Foreign Service reflects America abroad at all of our embassies. But I'll tell you, with each step within the Foreign Service, from the first exam to there are various other oral exams and activities that you have to perform to move forward, with each step, women, minorities get whittled away. And I think it's a real challenge to look at what barriers there are within that. It's something we need to do more of. But I'm so glad you're interested in state, and I would say stick with it. I know USA Jobs is a bear to deal with, but I would say really stay focused on that. Make sure when you come to state, get an internship that's, you know, in the policy planning staff or another place where you're able to be creative and point to the existing issues and say there's something here that I can lend my ability to.
Yeah, and we can talk in more detail later after this. One thing I will say, if you're looking for advice about how to get into law school, to go to a law firm or to a corporate, I am not the one to come talk to because I have no idea. And there's plenty of people here, no offense, but there's plenty of other folks that can give that advice. But if you're going into it for social service, public interest, and you're doing it for those reasons, then we can talk. And the primary piece of advice I would say is that you need to start proving that. You've got to have the proof in the pudding right now. When you're going to college, if this is really what you want to do, then don't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And so you need to start doing things that show on your resume, not that just you're a 4.0, but that you actually care about the community, you do public interest work, and you know something about it, because that's how you're going to set yourself apart from other people.
Great.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ray?
It might be worth mentioning the White House Initiatives program we just launched for the Senior Executive Service on
That's right.
and stuff like that.
Let me just say a word. That's a wonderful thing, Ramey, who you'll hear from in a minute. One of the mandates, the missions of the AAPI initiative is to do more to promote the hiring of AAPIs into the federal government, to do more to promote the retention, and entering the senior executive service, which is the level of career managers. We've just started a partnership with an outside group to get a group of promising senior AAPIs in the federal government to create network opportunities, training sessions, so that they can actually prepare to take that next leap into management. So it's something we're proud of. We're doing it at just with probably a dozen or so people now, but we hope to expand it much broader. Yes, over here.
Hi, my name is Janet Lamb, and I'm a sophomore at Woodrow Wilson High School, and I'm also a student representative for AA Lead. And my question is, do you have any advice for Asian youth who feel that want to get into politics, but feel that it's sort of intimidating because all the media and stuff?
I'll speak. I'm so glad to see you here. I'm actually a former mentor of an AA Lead student here in DC, and so AA Lead is a community organization that empowers the Southeast Asian community here, and they do a lot of mentoring programs and after-school programs and that type of thing. So I'm glad to see you here. Bottom line, I think that politics is intimidating, but so are a lot of other things in life. And the thing is, though, you have to have the confidence, and that's nobody else gives you or takes away that intimidation. You have to have that confidence, and if that means meeting more people, getting more comfortable in speaking, having the connections. You're in D.C. You go to school in Washington, D.C. And that's pretty amazing. So you have already advantages that many students throughout the country don't have. So you need to take advantage of that, and also you just need to start, using that access to your benefit. And the intimidation factor, absolutely, I get it. Going into the world of law, and it's majority white, it's majority men, and we're here, and we're not going anywhere. And the more people like you that want to be a part of it, take a risk, as we've said, and take those internships and get more involved. And AA Lead, I think, is really, really uniquely situated to help you do that. So take advantage of that organization.
Let me just say a word on this one, because I have some personal thoughts on this one. Look, politics is a tough profession. So is business, so is law. I have many friends that are doctors. That is no easy job as well. I think there is a perception of politics and the kind of personality you need to have to succeed. And believe me, there are no shortage of those people around this building. And I mean that they're all in the nicest way. I will say this, though. I have been surprised by how many just incredibly nice, kind, thoughtful people are in politics. There's no one way to do your job. Mira mentioned Melody Barnes, our former head of the Domestic Policy Council. Our new head, Cecilia Munoz, was just named. Hands down, these are two of the nicest people you will ever meet. So don't think that you have to have a certain personality. There are all types. Thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you.
Go back over here.
Hello, my name's sorry. Okay, my name's Happy, and I go to Balboa High School, San Francisco. I also am the vice chair of the San Francisco Youth Commission and a fellow with the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs. So I immigrated to the U.S. from China 2 years ago. I know some of you are immigrants, or some of you or your parents actually immigrated to the U.S. So then specifically for immigrant high school students, because I know most of you guys are college students, I'm in the audience. So any advice for AAPI immigrant students to encourage them to participate in politics, especially for those who come from countries that have less political freedoms?
This is all you. You're the immigrant.
Yeah, but you're the one that's heavily involved in politics. Okay. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be making any fans with the things that I say, but I guess that's my life. But I think the biggest thing that I hear people say to immigrants is assimilation. And I disagree with that. I think there's a form of, you have to understand, you know, the world you're living in, and you can't be blind to that, and you have to realize that there's a community, and in order to get things done, you have to figure out how to get things done. But I really reject the idea of assimilating and trying to become what you believe or other people are telling you is the standard of what an American is or is supposed to be. And so I think what makes this country so amazing is that people do bring these cultures and you hold on to them and you bring them and you add value and you enhance the experience. And so as an immigrant, I don't see that as as a situation that should be a hindrance to you. And I think that there are clearly many challenges with being an immigrant, but my one piece of advice would be to say to not assimilate away who you are and what your culture is about.
See.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Back over here.
Okay. My name is Josephine Chu. I was born here in the United States, but both my dad is from Hong Kong originally, and my mom is also Chinese descent, but she grew up in Vietnam. I'm currently a grad student over at American University studying global environmental politics, and I'm really interested in Chinese environmental issues, environmental health issues, so I was really interested particularly what the White House Department of State is doing in terms of environmental health issues for Asian Americans in the United States, and also specifically what they're doing in China with all the environmental problems there, especially because, as noted in your paper, it said like cancer is the leading cause of death for Asian Americans, and like with the environmental pollution being like a huge cause of a lot of these cancer, like what's being done with that.
So I'll tackle the international aspect, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues for the domestic one. One thing that the Secretary launched back in 2009, I believe, was the Clean Cook Stoves Initiative. And it's a public-private partnership which governments sign on to and organizations sign on to improve the quality of cook stoves in the home. Something that you're referring to is environmental pollution. We have, an Office of Climate Change led by Todd Stern, who is quite focused on the impacts of on climate change and the impacts it's having, both in terms of environmental degradation to impacting. For me, I always think about women. So, women who now have to walk an extra 5 or 10 miles to get water for their families, which exposes them to potential violence, limits their opportunities for health and education. The Cook Stoves Initiative, I think, is particularly important because it deals with the health of women and children who are primarily in the home. It's a clean burning, efficient fuel, so it improves their health. It improves the fuel efficiency for the environment. And it also allows children to be able to study at home, to have light at home. And so I think all those things are important. I hope that addresses somewhat globally what you were talking about. And I can always, there's more information on our website too on that.
I would just point to one initiative that is a partnership between the Department of Labor and the Environmental Protection Agency, and that is the Healthy Nail Salon Initiative. At the Department of Labor, we have an agency called OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which they're responsible for making sure that when you go to work, it's safe, and that clocking in at work doesn't mean, risking your life. And one of the things we found as part of this initiative is that there are a lot of nail salons in America where Asian American employees are exposed to a lot of toxic chemicals and fumes that are having adverse health impacts. So working together with EPA, we have done a study to identify what those are, and then also to take action through our regulatory authority and make sure that the proper masks and the proper protections are being taken, that there's ventilation, all those things. And it's also a process of education, because a lot of these nail salons are small businesses that are not only have Asian American workers, but have Asian American owners. And so we want to support those businesses, but we want to make sure that they have the education to know how to do right by their employees.
Let me just say a global comment about the environment. Clean air, clean water, it's not an Asian American issue, it's not an African American issue, it's an American issue. And it doesn't discriminate against certain people. Having said that, there is this issue of environmental justice and where we put power plants and where we put, landfills that does disproportionately affect certain communities. And that's an important initiative, and it's an important awareness that our EPA Administrator, Lisa Jackson, has been trying to focus on. At the end of the day, we have an amazing environmental record that we've compiled over the last 3 years, whether it's our focus on clean energy technology, whether it's an important mercury rule we just finalized a couple weeks ago that will save tens of thousands of people, whether it's the push to improve fuel efficiency standards that will decrease our dependence on foreign oil, whether it's our efforts to clean up the Chesapeake, the oceans, the Great Lakes. The actions that this president has done are saving lives every single day. And an important thing about this is the president went to EPA a couple days ago to thank the employees there, and he made an important statement that clean air, clean water is not incompatible with economic growth. And people, the other side loves to sort of set up that dichotomy. And you can have all of that. And I would posit to all of you that's what this administration is doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, over here.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Ramones. I'm a junior from Rutgers University. I have two questions for the panelists. When I first came into the room, I couldn't help but notice the giant title, AAPI Youth Leadership Briefing, and the White House above it. And after hearing all your personal stories, I'd like to ask you personally, and also as members of the White House, how would you define youth leadership and leaders? Because some of the speakers have been referring to us as leaders, so I would just like to know what that means to you guys. And also, one of the questions that we were asked during the icebreaker that I would like to know your personal opinion. What do you guys expect from being panelists from this whole thing, and what do you expect of us as leaders and as students mostly?
I think leadership is service. I think that my model of leadership is always service-based leadership, and what I expect of you is you got a seat in this room, but there are a limited number of seats. You watching online have the access and the technology to watch it. There are a lot of students who are experiencing the digital divide, for example, in the Pacific Islands, who don't have that access. What I expect of you is that what's said here doesn't stay here, that you will go home and you will bring together other students, other youth in the communities who may not be in school, who may not be going to college, and let them know what you learned from this experience and share the information forward. Eddie and his staff and John Carson are doing an amazing job with public engagement, but they are limited in how much they can touch. They rely on you to create a ripple effect from what we do here, and that's what leadership is to me.
Ditto. Good.
Let me just throw out one other thing. And the president often says this, that the greatest deficit we have is not the budget deficit, it's a deficit of trust in the federal government. And at the end of the day, whether it's the panelists you've heard from, whether the papers we've given you, you will get a sense of the depth and breadth of what government does. You will have met inspiring government leaders like the panelists here. You'll have a chance to hear from people like Raj Shah, who are just role models to all of us. I think there is no more noble way for you to spend your career than in government. But if you choose not to spend your career in government, I think it's irresponsible for you not to understand what your government does. And it is very commonplace, again, I'm not getting political, but folks on the other side of the aisle love to say, you know what, let's cut out this agency, let's cut out those government programs, until they actually need them. And at the end of the day, and we've had this, we're all for civil servants, we've come very close to shutting down the government twice this year. And only when we come close to shutting down the government do people actually think, well, what does that mean to me? And we should not have to force a crisis for people to understand that. So what I hope that you get a better understanding what government service means, what government does, and you help spread that message out through your community. Want to go back over here?
Okay. Good morning, my name is Lily Madali. I'm a Master's of Public Administration student at Georgia State University. And I think my question would be best directed to Parag. In Georgia, Governor Deal signed HB 87 into law. And because of that, some employers are more, I guess, because they don't want to deal with citizenship issues or E-Verify, they've resorted to name discrimination. As college students entering the job market, how do you recommend that we deal with issues like that?
Actually, I'm going to let Jayan take that because this is what she worked on for so many years. And we're obviously all very familiar with what's happening in Georgia right now.
I think that the administration and the Department of Justice, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Department of Justice anymore because I don't work there anymore, but I did work on a particular case that had a lot of immigration implications. And while that was happening, obviously every state, Alabama, Georgia, Utah, all of these states are passing these initiatives dealing with immigration. And so it is a huge issue and one that actually I think is getting a response and some action from the administration level, which it needs to, because there's all these silos of states trying to do their own thing and seeing how far they can push the envelope. And so it's a huge issue. And so I guess my answer is that there is not going to be, I don't know what the answer is right now, but I do know that the administration is trying to deal with it and trying to go to all these different states and file the lawsuits and trying to get the individual lawsuits with private civil rights organizations and other organizations that are doing it. And so it's becoming a big issue. And the language discrimination, I think labor or Department of Ed, accent discrimination, all these other different ways of discriminating against individuals will pop up. And there will be many more that we haven't ever even thought of that will come. And so, the way litigation is not the most efficient way of dealing with these things. And so I think it needs to be efforts through the legislative and judicial and policy making, community groups and social justice, grassroots organizing. So this really needs to come to a head where I think things have to be done on a bigger scale than just going to individual cities. I don't think that answers your question, but I know that it's a big issue and one that the administration is definitely trying to address.
And the only thing I'd add to that is we've been talking a lot today about the federal government and about internships and careers in public service. I strongly encourage you to consider careers and internships in the state and local governments because we need your leadership there especially. The lack of diversity we see in some of these state legislatures. And I think, sometimes no matter what side of the aisle you fall on, I think the people in your sphere of influence have a big impact on you. I know that when we were trying to pass gay marriage in New York, there were a lot of Republicans who finally ended up switching their votes because they knew people from that community. I think the same is true with immigration, that some of these laws might not have happened had the people making the laws had those relationships. There was a news story about Georgia just last week about how all these family farms are now going to not be able to harvest their crops for the season because they can't find labor to do it. And it's one of those consequences that I think the people writing the laws didn't consider, didn't realize who this was going to affect. So really consider when you go back working for your state legislature, as the young lady from Utah is going to do, because I think that could change the dynamic over the long term.
Great. I know we are short on time, and I'm sorry there are additional questioners, but we need to move on. Let me just thank the panelists for taking the time today, but more importantly for their public service. They are really inspirational to all of you. Let's just give them all one round of applause. And let me thank all of you. I was struck as we sat here of all the people that came up and they talked about how far away they had come for this. And it's really remarkable that all of you are here. I hope this is not just a half-day, one-day conversation that we're having with you and that this is beginning of a longer process, a longer dialogue. As you all may have known, the office that Eddie works in used to be called the Office of Public Liaison. And that signified kind of a one-way communication from the White House out to all of you. We've changed to the White House Office of Public Engagement. Which it really, I think, properly signifies the back and forth communication that we want to have with you. So I hope you'll feel free to reach out to Eddie if you have questions. You now know how to get me on Twitter. And apparently there's a way to interact with people on questions. I literally don't know anything about this, but I'm sure my staff will explain it all to you. And I'll be really, really disappointed by the end of the day if I don't have like 100 followers. So anyway, thank you again, and we'll pass it on to the next panel.
Thank you. Thanks,